What should I do if I get bald by Mr. Snow Wolf? Author, Chen Bing. Copywriting. Sydney is a carefree little white fox in the forest, until a big snow wolf falls from the sky one day. Deswalang was seriously injured, his eyes were cold, and he couldn't speak the language of the forest. Swilly went over to take a look curiously, and brought him some food, but the other party followed him. Such a big wolf followed her all day, looked at her, licked her, and forcibly wrapped her in his fur. Swilly was frightened to death, kicked him desperately, slapped him, yelled to go away, but the difference in size was too big, it was useless, blah. Zilan is the young master of the upper fairyland of the Zhongtian. Because of the failure of the calamity, she was forced to transform into the original body of the divine beast, and fell into a small fairyland that was isolated from the world and could not understand the language. However, she did not expect to see the 9 tails that had disappeared for thousands of years here. Fox. The little fox is lively, kind, and cute, and he likes him very much. She not only walked around him worriedly, but also brought him fruits to eat and found herbs to heal his injuries. Zilan was deeply moved and decided to reciprocate by acting as a bodyguard for her and keeping her warm at night. Seeing the little furball in her arms happily bulging into a ball, acting like a baby, and patting him and playing with him, Zilan felt very happy. He decided to bring the little 9-tailed fox back to the upper fairyland, marry her as his wife, and announce to everyone that she is the love of his life and the treasure of this world. A very misunderstanding story. Little furball, I'm not, I don't. QQ content label, sweet text search keywords, protagonist, Sydney comments on works. The carefree little white fox Swilly, by chance, picked up Zilan, the young master of the 9 layers of Sirius clan who accidentally fell into the fairyland. Because of the language barrier, the two had a series of ridiculous stories, but in the end they fell in love with each other and the two fell in love with each other. Love each other. A warm and sweet fairy tale, the love story between the big furball Zilan and the little furball Sydney, combined with the background of myths and legends, constructs a novel Oriental fantasy world view. The characters are lively and vivid, the interaction is cute and interesting, the whole story is positive, romantic, and relaxed. Lin Xiao, how could you do such a thing? Dark clouds billowed outside the house, heavy rain mixed with rumbling thunder poured down, and only the roaring flames of thunder remained in the pitch-black sky. It was clearly a midsummer afternoon, but the sky was as dark as midnight, and you couldn't see your fingers. In the Jinding Hall, the lights flickered, and the atmosphere inside the hall was as gloomy as outside. The elder monks with high seniority and great prestige stood in 2 rows like an array, all frowning and looking fierce. Among them, the elder who stood at the head and had the most seniority spoke like a bell, Lin Xiao. You have insulted the master and ruined the style of the family. You are not worthy of being on the road to ascending immortality. Today I will clean up the sect with the position of the leader of the peak, and will you drive out of Xinglan Peak? Every word of the old man's heart was punished, his voice was as deep as an echo in the sky, and there was no room for maneuver. The woman named Lin Xiao knelt in the hall with her knees down to the ground, her whole body in a state of distress. Her face was pretty, her thin lips were tightly pressed, she was silent and her expression was stubborn. She was sealed and frozen by Taoism, unable to defend herself. At the same time, the accusations and comments of other elders in Xing Linfen also slammed on her one after another. It's in vain that she is highly regarded by the uncle and the peak master. I thought she was a rare and outstanding disciple, but I didn't expect to be such a corrupt person in private. We people in Xinglan pursue the way of immortality with medicine as the way, and we should save lives and heal the wounded, but she dares to cheat on prescriptions and medical skills. Now that I think about it, the so-called unique fairy art she used before may have been a fraudulent trick. Otherwise, why did she always talk about teaching her with all her money, but no one from the same source as her learned it? Back when she was accepted into the peak, the fairy art she performed at the assessment meeting might be heresy. It doesn't matter if it's just an ordinary crooked way, but what Lin Xiao exposed today makes me unable to hold my head up in front of other Taoist friends. In a few words, the woman was completely convicted. There were a lot of people present, and some people actually thought that they should investigate thoroughly before making a conclusion, but their voices were quickly drowned out by the excitement of the crowd, and some people couldn't open their mouths seeing the situation. There were so many guests coming and going today, seeing Lin Fan could be said to have lost face when the accident happened. Lin Xiao was quickly dragged to the peak. Because of the heavy rain, most of the elders had already dispersed, leaving only the girl's master. The master was a haggard old man. He looked at the woman and let out a long sigh, then leaned over and released the sealing technique on her body. As soon as Lin Xiao was able to speak, she coughed a few times. The long restraint made her throat extremely dry and her body very stiff. She immediately squeezed out the words through her teeth with difficulty, "Master, I never did anything bad, why?" The old man sighed sadly again, "I believe in you," he said, "but the winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. Where is there no dispute in this world? Shower, you may have no desire to fight, but you blocked the way of others. Blame me for not teaching you this." Xinglan Peak is a Taoist sect of cultivating immortals. Everyone in the peak regards medicine as their Tao. In addition to alchemy and pharmaceuticals, they also understand the Taoism of the immortal sect. They can fight against the sky and fight. The old man didn't have much power in Xinglan Peak, he was just a small peak master living in a corner, so it was such a pleasant surprise to receive such an amazingly talented disciple as Lin Xiao, but he never expected to end up like this in the end. The old man leaned down, put an umbrella in front of the woman, and said, "Things have developed to this point, even if I want to keep you, you can't stay. Shower, you have gone to another place, don't be like this now." So. The old man hunched over and disappeared at the peak. Not long after, the woman slowly picked up the old umbrella, barely supported her body, and stepped into the dark rainstorm on the other side. Although the elders of Xinglan Peak had dispersed, many disciples gathered at the entrance of the peak to watch the fun. They didn't dare to get too close for the masters to notice, so they had to stand far away and stretch their necks. Naturally, they couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but the crowd was laughing and talking. Senior sister Lin Xiao was so beautiful back then. Unexpectedly, it was all fake. Let me just say, how can a normal person use such medical skills? If she really has this kind of ability, why is she still practicing in Xinglan Peak? She should have ascended a long time ago. As soon as senior sister Lin Xiao leaves, the most outstanding person in Xinglan Peak will be the senior brother of Xiao Feng again. The other two were talking quietly with their voices lowered. A disciple said, "You clearly know that the so-called evidence is not from senior sister Lin Xiao, why didn't you say it?" Another disciple replied, "Why should I say that? What's wrong with senior sister Lin Xiao leaving, besides?" At this moment, the disciple hadn't finished his evasive words when he saw a white light burst from the clouds. The light was so clear that it almost stabbed the eyes of everyone present. The disciples unknowingly let out exclamations, and blocked the light with their hands and umbrellas one after another, but then, they actually saw a group of figures walking out of such a brilliant light among the clouds. When they saw these figures clearly, they were suddenly silent. There are more than 10 people in this group, both male and female. They soared through the clouds and easily broke through the void of the 9 heavens that they could not penetrate in their entire lives. Microstep. A group of people came here in splendor, full of immortal aura, and easily landed in front of Xinglan Feng's gate. Surrounded by torrential rain with nowhere to hide, only their surroundings are safe and sound, with light sleeves and no drips of water. It's a fairy. It is a real fairy. They have practiced Taoism for many years, so they can naturally distinguish what is genuine immortal energy. Seeing Lin Fan's disciples are almost going crazy. Although they usually call each other friends of Daoism and friends of immortality, to put it bluntly, they are still mortals who seek longevity after all, and are far inferior to real immortals. It is a great honor to hear a little fairy sound. At this time, seeing Linfin's disciples didn't care about umbrellas and rain at all, and hurriedly kneeled respectfully on the extremely wet rain ground. The elders of Zinglin Peak who had gone back earlier also rushed back. Not only them, they heard that the real immortal came, and all the guests from other sects who came to visit today also came to the scene and hurriedly gathered at the gate of the peak. The master of the first peak bowed respectfully, did not dare to raise his head, and asked tremblingly, "I don't know why all the saints are here today." The fairy standing at the front asked modestly, "Excuse me, is Fairy Lin Xiao here?" Everyone didn't expect the real to ask Lin Xiao as soon as he opened his mouth, and the peak master was so nervous that his fingertips trembled. In a panic, he asked unconsciously, "I don't know why the sage wants to find Lin Xiao." The fairy replied, "It's for my young master." As she spoke, she took a half step sideways so that people could see behind her. I saw a male fairy next to the fairy holding a boy carefully in his hands. The boy looked to be only 2 or 3 years old. Although most of his body remained human, he still had snow-white ears and a tail that looked like a wolf's tail. He was falling into a deep sleep at this time, his face was pale, and his breathing was short of breath. The male fairy carefully protected him in his arms so that he would not be exposed to the cold wind again. The fairy said, "Lin Xiao is the reincarnation of Fairy Sheyin from the 9 heavens. He was transformed by the ancient snow lotus that can bring people back to life. He was born with yellow medicines and medicines for all kinds of diseases. Before our young master was born, his wife had a decisive battle with a monster and was seriously injured. And suffering from cold, the young master was born with the root cause of the disease, and it was difficult to wake up from a long sleep. This kind of severe cold entering the body is also rare in the fairy world. Fairy Yin's snow melting technique can cure the disease, but Fairy Sheyin has been going through calamities in the mortal world in recent years, and the secrets are unpredictable. After more than 2 years of calculation, I barely figured out that Fairy Sheyin's mortal body should be here, named Lin Xiao. I wonder if you can let Fairy Lin Xiao come out and let her take a look at my young master." The peak master was originally concerned about the wolf tail and wolf ears of the little fairy young master. Even if they are cultivators who have heard of the various forms of gods in the fairy world, they still feel different when they really see them, but after hearing what the fairy said, they immediately trembled. If you see the chaff, not only him, but all the disciples who were laughing and watching the excitement before couldn't laugh anymore. Tribulation? After a long time, to senior sister Lin Xiao, is it possible that they are a catastrophe? Seeing that the atmosphere was not right, the fairy frowned and asked, "What's wrong? Where is Fairy Lin Xiao now?" The peak master trembled and pointed forward in fear, pointing to the dark rain, and said, "You are 1 step too late. She has already left." On the other side, the figure of a woman walked alone in the boundless rainstorm. The torrential rain poured down like a curtain, and the violent thunder and rain almost drowned out all living things, and the repeated loud noises of the raindrops hitting the umbrella surface made the woman unable to hear her own footsteps. The cloth shoes she wore out of the room were already muddy, and apart from the old umbrella given by her master, she only had this thin summer shirt, which was also soaked by the rain at this time, making it icy and sticky. There is nothing left. She walked in the rain for a long time without knowing it. Her heart was cold and her steps were heavy. She was terribly disappointed with everything that happened in the master's school, and she couldn't believe that this was the Seeing Linfen she had lived in since she was a child. Desolate, cold-hearted, desperate, unwilling, can't tell which emotion prevails, but looking at the road in front of him at this moment, he is more confused. "I don't know where I am, and I don't know where to go. Woo!" At this time, she heard a faint cry in the rainstorm. The sound was like a child, and it was like a small animal. After walking a few steps, Lin Xiao saw an exquisite bamboo basket that should not have appeared on the hillside. It was shaped like a cradle and was left alone in the forest without any shelter. She stepped forward and saw that there was a little snow-white fox in the bamboo basket. It was obviously still very young, not to mention the cubs. They seemed to be unable to open their eyes, and they didn't even have the ability to climb out of the bamboo basket. The little cub was already extremely weak in the rain, her soft hair was all wet by the rain, and her voice was as thin as a gnat. She tried her best to curl up in the soft blanket placed in the bamboo basket, but the soft blanket was already soaked and it was useless. If this continues, death is only a matter of time. They were both desperate. Lin Xiao pursed his lower lip, forcing himself to harden his heart. She has nothing now, and of course others would not let her pack her luggage when she left Xinglan Peak. She had no money, no food, nowhere to go, and she didn't even have a medical kit with which to make a living. If she did something like that in public, no one cultivating immortals would keep her anymore. Now that she is in danger, how can she still have the spare time to take care of others? Besides, it wasn't even a human baby, just a little white fox. Lin Xiao left with an umbrella. The voice behind him gradually weakened, and finally there was no sound at all. Lin Xiao has gone a long way. Her steps stopped suddenly, she turned her toes, and finally folded back, put the umbrella on top of the bamboo basket, and squatted down. Hey! You won't have a good time when you meet me. After the rain stops, I'll see if I can find something for you to eat. Lin Xiao gently lifted the little white fox up. The little fox's body was already cold due to the rain, but she felt the temperature in Lin Xiao's palm, and she moved slightly. Her little paws hugged Lin Xiao's fingers, stuck out his tongue and licked her palm lightly. Lin Xiao originally planned to hold the little fox in his arms to keep warm, but after such a push, he realized that there was actually a round jade pendant the size of a palm placed under the bamboo basket in which the little fox was placed. She took out the jade pendant in confusion, but saw that the jade pendant was engraved with words, and the reverse side was painted with the pattern of a fox. Lin Xiao frowned and was about to take a closer look, but when he picked up the jade, the edge of the jade pendant slightly touched the little white fox. The next moment, before Lin Xiao could react, he saw a flash of light on the jade pendant, and the light pierced the rain curtain immediately. Shine straight into the forest. Immediately afterwards, Lin Xiao felt a huge wave of immortal energy. This level of fairy energy surge is not something a mortal like her can resist and understand. She frantically protects the little white fox in her arms, and in a posture of protection, she feels a huge gust of wind whistling from her ears. When everything calmed down, Lin Xiao opened his eyes again, and saw a gap in the scene in front of him, and this was the entrance to a fairyland. The mortal world is still stormy, but within the gap, there is a wonderful scene of singing birds and fragrant flowers. Lin Xiao was stunned. This fairyland is obviously related to the little white fox in her arms, but the little white fox is already very weak, and there is still a strong wind and rain around them, and Lin Xiaoban has nowhere to go, so she strode into it without much thought. In Wonderland, the little white fox curled up a little while, as if relying on it. The gate of fairyland closed behind her and disappeared without a sound. Almost the moment Lin Xiao and the little white fox disappeared, the gods who came here from Xinglan Peak came one after another from the horizon. The breath is broken. One of the male immortals chased them to the place where they disappeared, stopped for a while, and turned to the leading female immortal. Fairyland and mortal realm can be said to be two completely separated things at different levels. Lin Xiao and Little White Fox entered there, but they didn't find that there was a fairyland here. The female fairy felt a little flustered, stepped over to examine herself, and found that Shayin seemed to have disappeared out of thin air, and her calm face rarely showed a hint of anxiety. Before she could order the others to look around carefully, at this moment, a childish cough came from the arms of the fairy following behind. Cough, cough cough, cough cough. Young master. The fairy immediately became nervous and walked over to check. The young master, who has rarely woken up since birth, actually woke up at this moment, and everyone was shocked, and hurriedly returned to pay attention to him. But the young master sniffed slightly, as if smelling something, slowly opened his eyes, and said with a little confusion, "Can you let me down?" The immortals didn't dare to neglect, and hurriedly let him go to the ground, but even so, they still surrounded him 3 times inside and outside 3 times, for fear that the young master might make a mistake. The boy with wolf ears and wolf tail was just a very young child, but he vaguely felt that he smelled some strange smell. He had never smelled it in the fairy world, but he didn't think it was annoying. After a while, he bent down and picked out a small tuft of white hairs from the rain-soaked mud. The color of this small tuft is lighter than the fur on his body, and it seems to be younger than him, but it is difficult to distinguish the source. Young Master Swalang paused for a moment, and said, "There was another person here." "Little Lord." Hearing the young master's firm conclusion, the immortals showed doubts, but they didn't understand what he meant by this. However, little Snow Wolf just condensed slightly, staring at the white hair on his hand in a daze. The female fairy in the lead was very distressed when she saw such a young master standing in the rain. Even though the rain couldn't hit him, she felt pity for him when she thought that he had to fight against cold and sickness since he was born at such a young age. She squatted down and supported the young master's shoulders, and comforted her, "Don't worry about it, young master. It is really difficult to go against the law of heaven and forcefully find fairy Cheyenne. But even if there is no cure for the time being, we can still find other fairy medicines. Medicine can reduce the impact of cold disease, and if you practice hard over time, it will not hinder your daily life sooner or later. At that time, wait for fairy Cheyenne to return from the calamity, and then completely eliminate the body cold." Little Snow Wolf paused for a long time, put away the white hair, and gave an obedient hum. The immortal who had hugged him before hugged him again, protecting him airtightly. The little young master was already weak, and as soon as he returned to his arms, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. A group of people took off again, and soon disappeared into the sky in a mighty way. 3 years later. Hidden in Wonderland. The warm spring is harmonious, the flowers are blooming and the water is warm. The scorching sun is soft, the green grass in the fairyland is lush, the springs are gurgling, there are insects and birds singing, blue and white clouds, everything is clear and harmonious. Ah! 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 Lin Xiao built a small wooden house with Taoist techniques on a flat place near the water. After 3 years of continuous renovation and repair, it is already very complete with 5 internal organs, rooms and courtyards, everything you expect. At this time, the little white fox was playing outside the house, actively chasing the butterflies, bouncing around happily. Lin Xiao was sitting in the room sewing. She mended the clothes on her knees, bit off the end of the thread skillfully, and wound up the excess thread. "It's time to eat." "Woohoo!" The little fox who was playing outside turned his head when he heard her voice, let go of the poor butterfly, ran briskly back into the house with a dong dong dong, and happily said ow to Lin Xiao. Although the house is not big, it is very spacious for 2 people. The house is simply divided into 2 rooms, which can be regarded as bedrooms for 2 people. The kitchen is located elsewhere. In the big house connected to the outside, several simple wooden on the shelf, there are bottles and cans filled with a light medicinal smell and piles of herbs. There are also pharmaceutical supplies and some medical tools on the side, and daily items on the other side. Since there are no guests and outsiders, the layout is very casual. Lin Xiao watched the little white fox run in. 3 years ago, she was forced out of the teacher's school and had nowhere to go. By chance, she picked up this little white fox and accidentally opened this paradise-like fairyland. For her, this was a lifesaver, not to mention that the fairyland is also a part of the fairyland, and a mortal like her would not be able to step into it normally, so when she first stepped in, she couldn't help but stay for a while. It's just that she didn't have time to delay, so she was busy seeing the little fox who was already in danger. It didn't look very good. Lin Xiao realized that this little fox had 9 tails. I don't know if she didn't notice these 9 tails before, or they appeared only after entering the fairyland, which frightened Lin Xiao again for a moment. However, the jade pendant carried by this little white fox was able to open the fairyland. It has already been proved that it is not an ordinary fox. The 9 tails are just a further proof of its identity. The most important thing is to save her. Lin Xiao immediately found a way to settle down in the fairyland, warmed the little white fox, and found water and food for her. But even so, the little white fox was still seriously ill after a heavy rain. Fortunately, Lin Xiao was originally from Xinglan, and she is very proficient in Qiwang medicine. When she was in Xinglan Peak, she never encountered a patient who could not be cured. Although there was no one in this fairyland, the wild fruit spirit grass grew luxuriantly. It didn't take Lin Xiao much effort to find the right herbal medicine and rescue the little white fox. At this point, the two of them began to depend on each other. After all, the little white fox has 9 tails. It is both intelligent and spiritual, and it can transform into a human body. When it grows up, it can speak. The little fox is very curious and loves to play, likes to roll and run around, and has a little temper. Except that she prefers to run around in her original shape, she is almost the same as ordinary children. But it is strange to say that after entering this fairyland, Lin Xiao felt some strange changes in himself. For example, she vaguely remembered that her real name should be Sheyin, and she preferred to call herself by that. For example, in the fairyland, she seems to be able to use only another language, not human language. She seems to know this language in the past, but she can't remember when she learned it, and the little fox can speak this kind of language. For example, she could suddenly understand the words on the jade pendant, which she couldn't understand in the mortal world. The word Sydney was written on the jade pendant. This jade pendant seemed to be used to show her identity. The name of the white fox. Little Sydney, so cute. At this time, the little fox had already entered the house, ran to Sheyin obediently, shook his ears, and asked curiously, "Auntie, what are you eating today?" Sheyin came back to her senses. She put away her needle and thread, went to the kitchen to get her lunch. When the tight wooden lid was opened, the fragrance of wild vegetables came along with the aroma of the rice. The most homely wild vegetable stewed rice. The little white fox has been following her around, very happy to see what he ate today, jumping around excitedly. Sheyin said helplessly to her, "Go and sit on the seat, I'll take it over." "Ah!" Little Swilly ran back dragging her tail. She obediently jumped onto her little chair, her paws retracted, her tail curled up in front of her body, and she sat upright. It is probably related to the 9-tailed fox. Little Swilly grows much slower than normal foxes, but is similar to human children. She is only a little bit bigger when she is 3 years old. Steady, often falling and bumping. Sheyin fed her with a homemade wooden spoon. The wild vegetables in Wonderland are very spiritual, and they are deliciously steamed with rice. If you feed a spoonful, the little fox will obediently open his mouth to eat a spoonful, squinting his eyes and moving his ears in satisfaction from time to time. Easy to raise. However, Sheyin steamed other vegetables in the rice, and when the radish was fed, the little fox refused to eat it, and kept his mouth and eyes closed to hide from the spoon. Sheyin couldn't feed it, and pretended to be fierce. "Open your mouth quickly, picky eaters are not good for your health." Woo 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 woo. The little fox refused to open his mouth, and grunted to express his refusal. He shook his head, closed his eyes tightly, and hid back. How could Sheyin let her take pictures? Suddenly raised his head, and said in surprise, "Ah, the rice cake is steamed." "Ah! Little Swilly likes to eat pastries." Hearing this, she subconsciously opened her eyes and looked in the direction of the kitchen. Sheyin had sharp eyesight and quick hands, and took advantage of her owing to stuff the spoon into her mouth at once. Little Swilly caught off guard and took a mouthful of radish, Her mouth was filled with the taste of radish, and she immediately showed an indescribable expression, looking like she wanted to spit it out. Shayin rubbed her head and said, "Good boy, I'll give you rice cakes when the meal is finished." Little Swilly struggled for a while, but still aggrievedly chewed and swallowed the radish in her mouth, but after eating the radish, the whole little fox was visibly lethargic and her ears collapsed. Shayin continued to rub her head and praised, good job, our Sydney is the best." Shayin and the fox fed Swilly all the food in one mouthful, and finished eating in a short time. The little fox's unhappiness came and went quickly, and when little Swilly ate a small bite of rice cake as a reward, she turned around and forgot that her aunt had fed her radishes, and ran around the room in a good mood. Little Swilly said, "Auntie, I went outside to play." Shayin said, "Go." Little Swilly ran out of the house with her little feet, and had fun in the yard. However, she was probably full, and soon began to feel sleepy, and ran back to lie obediently on the porch of the cabin. Shayin was cleaning up the dishes, and after feeding the little fox, she also ordered food herself, so she sat in the house and made herbs, taking a look at what little Swilly was doing from time to time. After a while, the little fox lay on the porch and began to hum and sing. The little fox's singing voice is very nice. Her voice is still tender and crisp. She sings I don't know if it's because she is a nine-tailed fox, but soon after she sang, small animals poked their heads out of the forest and surrounded her curiously. Shayin was originally sorting the newly picked herbs with her head down, but she was also taken aback when she heard the tune of the little white fox, and couldn't help raising her head. The little fox actually loved singing since she was a child, and she often hummed ignorantly when she was lying in the bamboo basket. As she grew up, the tune became clearer and clearer. She had never taught the little white fox to sing any songs, but when she heard the tune of this song, she felt nostalgic for no reason. She couldn't help asking, "Sydney, where did you hear this song?" "Hey!" Little Swilly looked over and tilted her head. Little Swilly can't remember where she heard it from, but she often hears this melody in her mind, which makes her feel warm, like someone holding her in her arms in ignorance, whispering sang for her. Little Swilly thought about it carefully, and replied, "I can't think of it. It seems to have been in my mind all the time, as if I heard it a long time ago." "Yes." Shayin inevitably lost his mind. She looked out the window, but saw that there were already several small animals under the porch of the wooden house, including a small white deer, many small rabbits and small sparrows. They are all cubs, only the sparrows' wings are slightly plump, and they are all undeveloped, just ordinary creatures. At this time, they all looked at little Sydney friendly. When she first came to the fairyland, Shayin checked the inside and outside of the place. The fairyland is not very big, there is only this forest and stream, there is no one else but them, but there are some animals in the forest is not small, there are carnivores and herbivores, and the ecology is not much different from the outside. These small animals that came over were all born when they first entered the fairyland, and they were about the same size as little Sydney. I don't know if it's Shayin's illusion. When little Swilly sings, they often come to listen to them, and they become more and more intelligent, almost as if they are enlightened. Fawn even gave them presents last month. Not only that, since Sydney came to this fairyland, other creatures in the fairyland have begun to change. The carnivorous beasts gradually stopped eating meat. In the first year, Shayin encountered tigers hunting animals, and then they began to eat fruit. The reproduction speed of the animals in the forest is obviously much slower. Fewer cubs are born every year. Animals that should have multiple births often have only one child. Bird nests are often empty, and occasionally there is only one egg. At the same time, the growth rate of the cubs that have already been born has also become very slow, similar to little Sydney. These small animals that were born around the same time as her are still cubs now. This change is gradual, just like the arrival of the little white fox, injecting a truly fairy spirit into this place. Shayin looked out the window. Little Sydney was curiously stretching out her paws to the small animals on the porch, wanting to play with them, and soon ran down to join them. Although these little animals are not intelligent yet, little Sydney is happy to play with them, just like real friends. Shayin watched little Swilly play with them for a while, then went back to collect herbs. Just picking and picking, she looked at the medicine jars and herbs in front of her, suddenly a little dazed. In the blink of an eye, 3 years have passed. Living in this fairyland, I take care of the little white fox every day, gather and develop herbs, and live a peaceful life. I don't know the sun and the moon. Thinking back now, when she was practicing and studying at Zinglin Peak, from the time when she first entered the teacher's school and attracted a lot of attention, to the despair and helplessness of being forcibly expelled from Zinglin Peak in the rainstorm, it was so far away that it seemed like it happened in her previous life. When she was in the teacher's school, she didn't care about fighting openly and secretly, and she just focused on practicing medicine. Now no one disturbs her in the fairyland, and although the fairyland is small, there are quite a variety of medicinal flowers and spiritual herbs, and it is easy to plant. Shayin practiced with twice the result with half the effort. Immortal art is becoming more and more sophisticated, and his understanding of medicine is advancing by leaps and bounds, which is easier than it was in Zinglin Peak. It's just that Shayin's progress in medicine made Shayin excited, but after the excitement passed, she sometimes felt empty again, as if something was missing. Shayin concentrated on taking care of the herbs. When little Swilly came back to the house, it was already dusk and it was evening. With water on her body, it looked like she was rolling in the creek, and she squinted her eyes and shook her hair as soon as she entered the door. Shayin's herbs were almost packed, so she took a dry cloth when she saw it, and walked over to help her brush her hair meticulously. Little Swilly yelled, and took the initiative to get into her aunt's arms, cooperatingly wrapped in the wipes and rolled over, revealing her belly. Shayin simply hugged her on his lap and wiped her. Little Swilly lay obediently in her aunt's arms and rubbed her ears affectionately. But after a while, little Swilly suddenly asked, "Auntie, you said that the place we live in is a fairyland, so is it possible to go outside besides the forest and the creek?" Shayin froze. "Why are you asking this all of a sudden?" "Because there are so few people here, and every time I run to the other side of the stream, I feel that the spiritual energy has come to an end, and I can't get through if I want to go any further." Sydney is at the age of exuberant curiosity, wanting to know everything. She wagged her tail and asked, "Auntie, what's it like outside fairyland?" Thinking of her own experience, Shayin felt a pain in her heart, stroked Shweli's head, and said, "Outside, it's not as simple as in the fairyland. There are many people outside. Among them are good people and bad people, strong people and weak people, independent people who can insist on themselves, and people who follow others. These people make up all kinds of human beings, making the world lively and happy. There is a side full of humanity, but there is also a cold side that is painful and cruel. There are interesting places in the world, but you are still too young, and the cold side of the world is too dangerous for you, so I and the environment of the fairyland will protect you. You can't leave the fairyland now. When you grow up and have the ability to protect yourself from difficulties, you will definitely have the opportunity to go out and see." "Ah!" Little Swilly half understood what Aunt Shayin said, but she was very obedient and nodded seriously. Shayin watched her tenderly, and after drying the little white fox, he smoothed her fur little by little. "By the way, Auntie, haven't you finished sorting out your herbs yet? Let me sort them out for you." At this time, little Swilly noticed Shayin's clay pot of herbal medicines that had not been completely put away on the ground, turned over and rolled off Shayan's knees, and happily jumped to the side to help. Looking at her positive and happy appearance, Shayan smiled slightly, and walked over, intending to simply teach her how to classify. But to Shayan's surprise, before she could open her mouth, she saw little Swilly wagging her tail and happily dividing up her remaining herbs. Classifying herbal medicines is easy to say, but Fairy Shayan's classification is not ordinary. She directly divides several herbal medicines according to the formula and categorizes them into packages, so that she can directly use them for grinding and refining next time. And this time not only one kind of medicine was distributed, but also the semi-finished product that she planned to test the effect of. Little Swilly didn't wait for her to teach her, so she picked up herbal medicines and divided them into several portions. Although the quantity was a little rough, the categories were generally correct. Shayan asked in surprise, "Swilly, why did you group these types together?" "Hey!" Little Swilly tilted her ears, put a small leafy plant stem she was holding in her mouth on the paper bag, and assembled another group. She said, "Auntie, you told me before that these kinds of herbs can be used together to make a soothing and fragrant medicine. I think your remaining herbal medicines look a bit similar." Shayan pointed to another group of herbal medicine packs with a different combination of herbs beside this group, and asked, "What about this one? Why did you use the previous main herbal medicine as the base, but put a different spiritual herb on it?" Little Swilly said, "Because the colors of the marks on the medicinal paper are different, it should be different kinds of herbs." "And, didn't you say that the same herbal medicine will have different effects when mixed with different things? The combination of herbs is a panacea, and the combination of another herb may be poisonous. I saw that there are herbs that your aunt said have opposite properties, so I put them on it." Shayan herself doesn't remember when Xiao Swilly taught her what Xiao Swilly said, and most of them mentioned it casually when collecting herbs or making medicines, but she didn't expect Xiao Swilly to memorize it, and she can draw inferences about other cases from one instance and apply it in practice. Even though little Swilly might just let it go like a child playing around, but Shayan's eyes lit up little by little after hearing what she said. But at this point, Xiao Swilly couldn't help asking doubtfully, "But I remember that this kind of herbal medicine with opposite medicinal properties must be picked in spring when the ice and snow melt, so it can be used, but the growth time is very short, only 2 months, most of them are still at the coldest time, so it is difficult to pick." "Auntie, why do you have so many?" Shayan pursed her lips and smiled, casually picked up an unopened flower bud from the herbal medicine, placed it in the palm of her hand, then slowly mobilized her spiritual energy, stretched out her hand to show Xiao Swilly, and said, "Look, what is this?" Little Swilly poked her head and saw that the bud that had been plucked and slightly dry was stimulated by Shayan's spiritual energy, and it became plump again, gradually regaining its vibrant color, and slowly blooming, revealing the rose-colored stamen. Little Sydney shook her ears in amazement. Shayan explained, "This is the art of melting snow, which can melt snow and rejuvenate, and eliminate the cold air left behind under certain circumstances. This herb can only be used in early spring because the cold air left in the severe cold is too severe, but as long as you use spells, the problem can be solved." "Ah!" Little Swilly looked at the flowers in Shayan's hands with great curiosity. She carefully stretched out her paw and touched the palm of her aunt, and found that it was really warm, but it was not the usual warmth, it had a kind of gentle and happy feeling. Swilly said happily, "Auntie is amazing." Shayan smiled and asked, "Would you like to try it yourself?" "Not bad." Little Sydney pricked up her ears. Shayan nodded, "Of course." As she spoke, she told her the heart formula of the snow melting technique. Little Swilly tried her best, imitating her aunt's example to mobilize the fairy energy in her body, stretched out her little paws, so that the little white hairs all over her body stood up, but she still couldn't warm Xiahua up. However, Shayan watched Xiao Swilly imitate her way of using her fairy energy, and the light in her eyes became brighter and brighter. Although Xiao Swilly is currently limited by her cultivation and cannot use such a difficult medical method, her method is correct. she uses it very transparently, and is very talented. When Shayin was in the mortal world, she failed to teach anyone her unique medical skills. Even the master could not understand the way after she told the truth, but if the little Swilly in front of her was so smart, she might be able to learn. Shayin couldn't help asking, "Honey, do you want to practice medicine with me?" Ah! Little Swilly was still trying to warm up her paws, but when she heard her aunt's words, she raised her head. She actually doesn't know much about medicine, but she sees her aunt playing with medicinal flowers and herbs every day, and of course she finds it fun and interesting, as if stepping into an unknown world. Little Swilly immediately jumped up and said, "I want to learn. I want to help my aunt." Saying that, Little Swilly happily jumped on her aunt. Shayin immediately picked her up happily and rubbed her in his arms. The little white fox is rolling with laughter, waving its paws and playing with its aunt, one person and one fox. The picture is very warm. So from this day on, Little Swilly began to learn medicine from her aunt. Since it is cultivation, there will be hard work. Little Swilly was young, so Shayin would never let her out of his sight for too long. From then on, she always brought Little White Fox by her side, whether it was gathering medicine, pounding medicine, or practicing medicine, she was always watching by her side. And also specially taught her fairy art. Shayin took her to various places in the forest while collecting herbs, and pointed out to her the herbs on the mountain one by one. This is green leaf grass, which can promote blood circulation and remove blood stasis, and has a smooth effect. These two herbs look very similar, but this one has tiny toxins and cannot be used indiscriminately. The difference between them lies in the rhizomes. You have to peel off their leaves to identify them carefully. Shayin led her to pound the medicine with her hands. This kind of hard-shelled fruit is hard to break. If you want to hold the medicine pestle like this, if you really can't break it, you can use a little fairy power. You meditate like me. Practicing medicine is different from practicing mortal medicine. Spells and immortal powers are also our medical skills. If you want to use some difficult spells, you must have a solid foundation in your cultivation and you can't slack off. Practice. As her aunt practiced medicine, Xiao Swilly couldn't always use the fox shape, and she gradually got used to the human body. Time passed day by day like this. In the blink of an eye, it has been more than 10 years. The time in the fairyland is peaceful, and the years of more than 10 years have hardly left any traces on the scene of the fairyland. The small wooden house is still the same. Outside the house there are luxuriant trees, spring grass is like a carpet, and the clear sky is as clear as blue. She was pounding medicine, snow fungus, and white tail. She was dressed in simple and elegant plain clothes, but she had an elegant temperament. I saw her grabbing a handful of grass leaves and putting them into the medicine mortar, smashing them neatly. With skillful techniques and graceful posture, the room immediately scattered. The medicinal taste is fragrant. At this time, a half-sized young white deer came to the door, gently raised its front hoof, knocked on the door, and called, "Sydney. Do you want to go out to play together?" The girl pounding the medicine must have stopped what she was doing, turned her head around, and revealed a beautiful and bright face. The girl was born beautiful, with a beautiful face and snow-skinned skin. There seemed to be stars in a pair of clear eyes, which were not stained with lead. She had a faint fragrance of herbs on her body, and her temperament was unparalleled. The little white deer opened the door and came in. Seeing the medicine mortar and pestle in her hands, he was surprised and said, "Didn't Aunt Xiao go out and won't be back for so long? You're still pounding medicine." Shueli said, "Daily work cannot be neglected. My aunt said that no matter what I do, if I slack off for too long, I will die by hand. Medicine is a matter of life and death, and there should be no negligence. Besides, I will prepare more medicine in advance. If someone in the forest, if you accidentally get injured and get sick, you can get medical treatment in time." As she spoke, she took out the crushed herbs neatly, carefully wrapped them into a small square paper bag with paper, wrapped them with red string, and wiped off the medicinal juice. The combination of the color of the medicine paper and the color of the red string can clearly and simply distinguish the types of different medicines, which is concise and clear. Aunt Cheyenne was not in the fairyland recently. She left the fairyland with the medicine box half a month ago and went to the mortal world. Ever since Sydney grew up and was able to take care of her own life, and the nearby creatures who had developed spiritual intelligence could also assist her, Cheyenne would sometimes go out to the mortal world for free consultations for a short time, saying that it was to test how much of her medical skills she had. Diligent, by the way, see if there are new intractable diseases in the mortal world, and if they can't be cured, then find a way to overcome them, and save lives and heal the wounded. According to my aunt, the way of medicine is born to cure diseases and save people. Without the benevolence of doctors, there will be no medical skills and prescriptions. My aunt usually does not leave the fairyland for a long time, as many as 5 or 6 days, and as little as 1 or 2 days, but as Sydney grows up, the time she can leave is getting longer and longer. There will be some problems, so this is the first time that Aunt Cheyenne will leave for more than half a year in one breath. Swilly's subordinates kept moving, but thinking of her aunt leaving for so long, she couldn't help lowering her eyes. She casually said to Belu, "I still have some herbs that I haven't finished processing, you wait for me for a while, and go out to play after I finish it." "It is good." The little white deer nodded, its bright eyes were very agile. It was obviously not the first time that the little white deer had come to wait for her in the small wooden house in Sydney. She was very comfortable and casual, and she walked briskly around the house with her little hooves. Suddenly, she saw Sydney's unsealed wooden storage box, and she couldn't help exclaiming, "Shweli! You didn't eat any of the food that Aunt Xiao left for you." Shweli's hand holding the pestle trembled and stopped, her face was hot immediately. She immediately rushed over, closed the lid of the wooden box, and stuck herself on it. "Don't look at it." Swilly hugged the box full of radishes, and said embarrassingly, "Auntie will be back for a long time, so it doesn't matter if you eat less." Cheyenne worried that she would not be able to find something to eat when she was not at home, so she had stored a lot of food for her at home in advance. The aura in the fairy world is abundant, and herbal foods are almost indestructible. Cheyenne also specially matched the varieties for her according to the balanced nutrition. Sydney only needs to take a little of each kind and burn it every day. However, it seems that half a month has passed, and Sydney has not touched the carrots here at all. The little white deer looked worriedly at Swilly, who suddenly exploded, and said, "But what will you do when Aunt Xiao comes back?" "She will definitely check if you have eaten properly when she comes back." Swilly's white, fluffy tail hair was bristling, and she said stubbornly, "I didn't say I wouldn't eat it, and I will eat it in a few days." The little white deer said, "But you don't eat a single radish now, maybe you have to wait until a few days before Aunt Xiao comes back to eat together." "Sydney, anyway, I will eat it in the future." As she spoke, she tightly closed the lid of the wooden box, patted it, and then ran back to finish processing the remaining herbs. The little white deer was helpless, dubious about what she said to Shweli that he would take it in the future, but he had no choice but to quietly lie down on his knees and watch her process the potion. Swilly is skilled in technique, and has been practicing medicine strictly under the guidance of Fairy Cheyenne for more than 10 years. Every movement of her is smooth, as if she did it directly without thinking, but graceful and unrestrained, without a trace of sloppiness. The little white deer looked at it in admiration, unconsciously fascinated. There was only a little finishing touch left in Sydney, and soon all the herbs were cleaned up. A whole row of medicine bottles and medicine packages were arranged in sequence, and the house was filled with the fragrance of herbs. Sydney arranged all the objects neatly and said with a smile, "Okay, I've done it." As she spoke, she suddenly moved and turned back into a little white fox in her original body. 4 fluffy little white claws are standing firmly on the ground, with 9 tails without any variegation behind them, and soft snow ears standing on top of the head, and every part of the body is white and flawless, just like a pair of 12th moon wines and sunny mornings. Snow. As soon as Xue Li changed back to her original body, she squinted her eyes and shook her hair uncomfortably, calling out, "Wow! She has grown longer than when she was a child, but I don't know if it's the breed or something, but she looks smaller than the average fox, and she looks very huggable and fluffy." Seeing that Xue Li had turned back into a little fox, Beilo hurriedly knelt down on his front hooves meekly, arched his back, and wanted her to climb onto his back. Xue Li is the only beast in Wonderland that can transform into a human body. She holds the key of Wonderland on her body and is the owner of Wonderland. She helped everyone to be wise at the beginning, and the creatures close to her usually play together, but they often endure. Can't stop showing respect. No need, I can go by myself. Xue Li shook off all her white hair, quickly shook her head, then excitedly touched the white deer, and asked, "Where are we going to play today? Where are the others? You come with me." Seeing that she didn't want to take advantage of him, the little white deer didn't force it. He straightened up, kicked his hooves lively, and ran outside. Ah! Seeing this, little Xue Li quickly followed with her tail wagging happily. A fox and a deer soon disappeared into the forest after bouncing and chasing. Same moment. At a height of 40,000 feet, the clouds pierced the sky, and the air was separated by 9 realms, before it reached the sky above the clouds. On the wide and flat roof, several young male disciples of similar age are competing. They were all about 17 or 18 years old. In the fairy world, they were more than a teenager, and when they were young, they were a little childish, but they all had youthful, frivolous, arrogant expressions on their faces, and their eyes were shining with stars. The two people who are competing are fighting fiercely. You come and go, your figure is so fast that it is almost impossible to catch the silhouette, and the light that jumps out of the weapons is like lightning flashing, lightning and thunder. Ordinary people cultivate immortals to pursue longevity, and live in the fairyland after longevity. The fairyland is divided into upper and lower layers. Performing their duties, they are in charge of the operation of the fairyland and the mortal world. This is the place where wolves live. In the fairyland, most of them are wolf gods and gods with extremely high cultivation. The wolves are loyal and tenacious, and they are ferocious beasts. Standing up is naturally extraordinarily brave and forging ahead, without any sign of retreat or fear, just like sharp arrows shooting out of the bowstring. The fight is extraordinarily high-spirited. Those two fought fiercely, and the rest of the people also stared intently, cheering and applauding from time to time, emotionally. On top of the crowd, there is a young wolf fairy who is also 17 or 18 years old. He has a handsome face and sits leaning sideways on a Chinese chair with a thick white velvet robe on his shoulders. His original shape is a snow wolf. Everyone stood or sat on the ground, but he was the only one sitting at the top, with an extraordinary status. Stop! After the young wolf fairies had roughly decided the winner, the wolf official shouted, and the two disciples who were still fighting immediately separated quickly. The tasseled gun that came out of one of them spun several times in the air before stopping firmly behind his back. The wolf officer turned his head and saluted the young wolf fairy on the flower seat, saying, "Young master, it's your turn." The young wolf fairy nodded slightly, stood up, and the leisurely fur coat fell from his shoulders, revealing his straight shoulders and narrow waist, and he walked forward slowly. The long-awaited opponent is the best among the disciples. He has fought against the young master many times. Although he has never won, just being the young master's opponent is enough to make people feel excited. He took out his weapon and stood on Sendai solemnly and excitedly. Young Master Swalang also arrived soon, and the two saluted each other. The wolf fairy looked at the figure of the young master with admiration. Because his wife was injured during pregnancy, the young master suffered from the root cause of the disease in the womb. He was weak since he was a child, and even had a long period of time when he was young, sleeping more and waking up less often. Many doctors worried that he would die if he did not grow up. However, more than 10 years later, the young master not only did not die young, but also became the most outstanding disciple among the young people of this generation by virtue of his own hard work. After the current Fairyland Master abdicates, the young master will be the next Wolf King. His talent is outstanding, his cultivation speed is astonishing, not to mention his celestial power. His beast body is also a beast snow wolf that can control the stars, far more powerful than ordinary wolf immortals. Both human body and beast body have extremely strong combat power. At his age he is absolutely invincible among similar immortals. Thanks to the cultivation level of the young master that is higher than ordinary people, the cold disease brought out from the mother's womb will hardly affect him, but he has not recovered after all, and he often needs to wear a fur robe to keep warm even in summer. Body temperature, and occasionally severe cold and pain when the onset is severe. The young master has a persevering personality. Even at this time, he will not let people easily notice his weakness. He endured silently to the end by himself, and he already has the demeanor of a future Wolf King. But in the most serious cases, the young master will stay behind closed doors for several days in a row. It is self-evident that the difficulties in cultivating to the current level under such circumstances are self-evident, but the young master has managed it. At this time, the two young masters on the rooftop had already started fighting. The person who confronted the young master was already the most outstanding disciple among the other young wolf cubs, but facing the young master who was a snow wolf, he was completely at a disadvantage, and had almost no strength left to fight back. The young master holds a sharp blade, his gaze is as firm as a blade, and he is indifferent to the opponent's brave attacks, as if these attacks have not affected him in any way. The young master Swalang had a sharp reaction and quick movements, which made the opponent retreat steadily. Not long after, he cut off the opponent's weapon with one move. Victory was won without any suspense. The young master Swalang put away his two swords, and stood calmly on the Xiantai, with a tall and straight figure and an ordinary expression, as if his emotions were not affected by this battle. On the contrary, his opponent looked a little embarrassed at this time. After a fierce battle, his legs and knees were already unstable, and he could barely stand up. The young master bowed slightly to him as a mutual thank and salute, then turned around, walked slowly back to the flower seat, and put the brocade fur on his body again. Sparrow was silent. Young Master Snow Wolf sat back on the seat. "Thank you, young master." The opponent finally came back to his senses at this time, and quickly returned a salute to the young master, but the shock he received in the battle just now had not dissipated, so he was afraid to look directly at the opponent. He has tried many times with the young master, but he has never lost so quickly. The young master has become stronger again. The young master has become stronger so fast, far surpassing anyone in their generation. No wonder he reached the peak of a realm so early, even compared to the current Wolf King. It is hard to see that he is still enduring the occasional seizures. Illness. Young Master Snow Wolf seemed to ponder for a short while, before saying, "I also want to thank you. You have improved a lot compared to last time, and we both should gain something from this battle." After that, he waved his hand and said, "I'm tired, so I'll go back first." "Go ahead." "Yes." Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the young Master Swalang raised his body, supported the snow-white fur coat on his shoulder with one hand, and left in the direction of walking down the Xiantai. Seeing the young master leaving and handing over the scene to others, the wolf fairy followed, carefully watching the young master's expression. Young Master Snow Wolf walked straight forward without looking sideways. Today is the day when the wolf fairy disciples of the same age in the wolf territory compete for rankings, and it happens every 6 months. Today's battle will determine the status and respect of each disciple among the wolves. Therefore, although it is a duel, everyone will still try their best to fight for it. However, the young master doesn't seem to care about it. Just halfway through the competition, he had a headache, did not go back. The wolf officer couldn't help asking, "Young master, are you still worried about the impending breach?" The pace of young Master Snow Wolf stagnated for a moment, but he didn't stop there, and continued to walk forward. The young master is about to usher in a realm breakthrough. People in the fairy world practice Taoism, and every time they accumulate to a certain level, there will be a leap-like improvement. A leap is a state, and the process of leaping is a breakthrough. The immortal energy will change drastically when breaking through the realm. Those who break through the realm usually have to face many tests set by the heavens and experience hardships that are impossible to experience in ordinary cultivation. Therefore, breaking through a realm is like experiencing a catastrophe, but comprehension can make people instantly enlightened and immediately reach a whole new level. With the young master's current strength, it is not particularly difficult to break through the first level realm normally. But breaking the situation is dangerous after all. The young master's cold disease is a great hidden danger. No one knows what will happen when the situation is broken. If the young master's cold disease happened to happen at that time, the consequences would be disastrous. For this reason, the young master has been painstakingly cultivating recently, trying to improve his cultivation as much as possible before breaking through. The wolf officer sighed and comforted, "Young master, don't be too anxious. It is up to people to plan things, and it is up to heaven to make things happen. With the young master's cultivation base, it is a sure thing to break through this level. The Wolf King and the Wolf Queen have already done it. Now that I have prepared for this, it is almost impossible for there to be any mistakes. I have already done everything that can be done, and the rest depends on the destiny." Young Master Snow Wolf was silent for a moment, then said, "I know." While speaking, the two of them had already entered the Dao room where the young master practiced daily. The Taoist room is spacious, with a fire burning in the room. There is a faint burning fragrance, mats are spread on the floor, and paintings are hung on the walls. There are pictures of stars and beasts hanging on all sides of the Taoist room, all the prototypes of the gods and beasts in charge of the stars in Zhukongtian. Only the image of the nine-tailed fox was painted with ink, and a big cross floated on the painting. Among the divine beasts, it looked particularly glaring and miserable. The nine-tailed fox was originally one of the 9 heavenly beasts. However, thousands of years ago, the ancestors of the nine-tailed fox led the whole family to move to the fairyland. Some accident happened on the way, and all of them disappeared. Gone. At that time, many immortals and beasts tried to find it, but they found nothing. Since then, the fairy spirit of the nine-tailed fox has never appeared in the Zhuzongtian. In a blink of an eye, the nine-tailed fox has been extinct for thousands of years. Because of the loss of fairy energy, all the nine-tailed fox's star and beast maps naturally floated crosses, the star in charge dimmed, and the fairy scroll was half removed. Take care, in recent years, there are far fewer people who have enlightened their spiritual wisdom than in the past, and even none of them have succeeded in cultivation. The situation is quite miserable. As soon as the wolf officer entered the Taoist room, he immediately saw the picture of the nine-tailed fox with a cross. "I saw a crescent moon painted on the divine map, and a snow-white nine-tailed fox rested on the moon, its 9 tails hanging down lightly like clouds, with a lazy and comfortable posture. It's just a pity that as time goes by, the fairy aura of Shenta gradually dissipates, not only floating, but even the color gradually dims." The wolf officer looked at this picture and couldn't help feeling emotional. "I heard from my great-grandfather in the past that the nine-tailed fox clan, both male and female, were beauties as beautiful as the moon and flowers. Who is better between Chunli and the beauty of the pheasant family? The first beauty has never won or lost for many years, all because they have never seen a nine-tailed fox." The young master Snow Wolf took off his heavy fur coat, followed the wolf officer's words, and his eyes fell on the picture of the nine-tailed fox, but he just glanced at the faded nine-tailed fox and didn't pay attention. It has been more than 1,000 years since the nine-tailed fox disappeared. For these new immortals who were born only 17 years ago, the nine-tailed fox has existed for too long. In his mind right now, there is nothing but breaking the boundary. Young Master Snow Wolf sat down in the middle of the Taoist room, beside the redot stove. He said to the wolf official, "You go back, the day of breaking the boundary is not far away, I want to retreat and practice alone here for a while. If there is nothing important, don't let people disturb you." "Yes." Officer Wolf quickly responded. "In fact, he won't be able to stay for long, it's already warm spring, but in order to prevent the young master's cold from recurring, his room is always lit with charcoal all the year round. The young master's physique doesn't matter, but other people can't." It took only a short while for the wolf officer to walk in, and there were already big beads of sweat on his forehead, and the back of his spring shirt was soaked in a large area. The wolf officer had to wipe off his sweat, and Fang said, "Young master, then I will stay soon. If you need something, call me." "Okay." After the wolf officer withdrew from the Taoist room, only the young Swalang was left in the Taoist room. Snow Wolf slowly stretched out his hand to the side of the stove, feeling the warm temperature from the hot air. His eyes were imprinted with the red and jumping stove light. He knew from an early age that he was different from others. Even when he was not sick during the hot summer months, he never felt as hot as others. Whenever he was around a hot fire, no matter how desperately others tried to escape, he felt nothing but warmth. Only by cultivating desperately, only by constantly breaking through and improving his cultivation base, will the cold disease affect him less and less, and he can try his best to be like a normal person. Young Master Snow Wolf lowered his eyes slightly, he waved his sleeves and closed his hands, sat down on the ground, closed his eyes, and began to meditate. The day when the Snow Wolf young master breaks through is just 3 days later. For the past 3 days, he has hardly been able to leave the house behind closed doors. He seized the last time to devote himself to cultivation, and only hoped that no accidents would happen. 3 days later, the young master opened the door of the Taoist room, and walked up to the Juxiao Yuntai wearing a white fur coat. Above the Yuntai, the Wolf King and the Wolf Queen were already waiting for him at the entrance of the Yuntai. The Wolf Queen held his hand and said, "Zilan, Mother has already arranged everything. When you break through, you must be careful and don't be impatient. Father and Mother will always be by the cloud platform, waiting for you to return smoothly." Zilan's eyes moved to the side of the cloud platform, and saw that there were suspended stoves at the 4 corners of the cloud platform as far as the eye could see. "Extinguish, and you can bless you for peace." Parents love their children in every detail. Zilan met the Wolf King and the Wolf Queen with deep concern, lifted the hem of his clothes, knelt heavily, and bowed down to his parents sincerely, with his sleeves swaying to the ground, and his hair crown facing the sky. There were tears in the eyes of the Wolf King and the Queen, but they held back and never let them fall. "Father, Mother, I'm over." After the family of 3 left, it was time for Zilan to go to Robbery, and the Wolf King and Queen finally let go of his hand reluctantly. The young Master Swalang once again waved his fists to his parents to say goodbye, and finally turned around and stepped into the Juxiao Yuntai. The moment his boots stepped on the cloud platform, the surface of the platform shook like a mirror of water, and ripples rippled from the soles of the boots, gradually turning into a sea of clouds and floating clouds for thousands of miles. Zilan followed the ripples to the center step by step, only to see a small palm-length pagoda floating straight in the center of the original cloud platform, with a clear golden light glowing in the center of the pagoda. Zilan put his hand on the tower. "This is the Yuntai Golden Pagoda for breaking through the realm. People who plan to break through the realm need to step out of the void, touch the Golden Tower, and use the Golden Tower to judge their level of cultivation. If they meet the conditions, they can see what they need to cross to break through the realm. The fate of the checkpoint is sometimes thunder, sometimes it is frozen for thousands of miles, and sometimes it is an illusion." Young Master Swalang's hand touched the golden pagoda, and in an instant, the flow of aura in the pagoda rushed into his black hair. Zilan closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, everything on the cloud platform was gone. All of them disappeared, and what appeared in front of his eyes was an endless darkness and a chessboard glowing in the darkness. His parents couldn't come with him, but the 4 sacred furnaces were still suspended in the 4 corners, and they were followed closely by the guardian. It is 36 formations of broken chess. Seeing the scene in front of him, Zilan immediately understood what it was, and felt a little relieved. Although there are many kinds of immortal tribulations, most of them have been experienced by elders. Although the experience cannot be fully substituted, it is possible to infer the method of breaking it based on this. If you want to break through the realm, most of the people who are tested cannot escape the 6 characters of cultivation, character, and comprehension. Once you have some insights in the process of breaking through the realm, you will not be far from the next realm. Just as Lei Ji usually has 8 Yon main thunders plus several small thunders, this chess formation usually consists of 36 games, and after each game, a phantom beast will appear, allowing the breaker to fight with it. Zilan knew it well. He flipped up his clothes and sat down on one side of the chessboard, holding the black, and made the first move. As soon as his black piece landed, the white piece immediately landed on the board with a click, as if someone was playing against each other. The wolf is kind and forbearing, and Zilan is the best among them. He is very patient and can adapt to this long chess game. Row the tricky tricks and repeated provocations in this chess formation, he is not shaken at all. He concentrates on dormant and secretly arranges. It was not until the critical moment that one blow was dispatched, and the lure was instant. The moment he landed his last piece on the chessboard and won the game, a gust of wind suddenly surged in the darkness. I saw the spiritual energy sweeping like a storm, and gradually outlined the outline of a golden leopard not far away. As soon as the golden leopard took shape, it immediately roared, revealing a mouth full of sharp fierce teeth. Then he ran with 4 claws and rushed towards him nimbly. Zilan's expression remained unchanged. He quickly showed his 2 swords, and with just one move, he hit the oncoming golden leopard. The golden leopard howled unwillingly, turned into aura again and disappeared into nothingness. In this way, Zilan sat back to the distance again, only to see that the chessboard had been cleared, and the positions of the black and white pieces had been switched. He stretched out his hand to hold the white piece, and started playing chess again. Just like this, Zilan won one round after another in one breath, and the phantom beasts that appeared after each round gradually changed from leopards to giant pythons, tigers, and later even jiao, vaguely showing the posture of a dragon. At this time, after 30 innings, Zilan has been silently remembering the number in his heart, but even so, he has been able to handle it with ease from the very beginning, and gradually became more difficult. Sweat broke out on his forehead, and his body could hardly resist fatigue. After all, it is very difficult to break through. Zilan already felt that after experiencing so many chess games, his concentration will definitely be greatly improved when he returns to reality, but at this time he has obviously felt that it is difficult to support. Finally, after the 32nd game, the dragon appeared. Zilan held double blades and fought back powerfully, but after so many rounds of wheel battles, he was already exhausted. After several rounds of fighting with the golden dragon, he finally couldn't help showing his original shape. Zilan's original form is the mythical beast Snow Wolf. With a flash of silver light, an extremely tall wolf appeared in the darkness. He is more than 10 times the size of a normal male wolf. His fur is as bright as a silver moon, his eyes are as bright as the morning stars, his 4 claws are sharp and wind-ridden, and his appearance is mighty. Both of them are divine beasts, and when Zilan's image that seems to be glowing with brilliance appears, his momentum is not inferior to the golden dragon in the 32nd game in front of him, and he even wins by a little bit. The combat power of these divine beasts is usually stronger than the human body, but the human body alone can tell the winner. Therefore, if the 2 sides fight, if one side is forced out of its original shape, it will be a shame that its skills are not as good as human beings. The original form can also save more stamina, so it is usually saved until the end. Zilan couldn't support himself anymore and had to show his original shape, but his eyes were still fixed on the golden dragon, his chest heaved violently, and he was panting. He rushed forward quickly, and a wolf and a dragon started fighting. Zilan was still able to maintain an even match with her human body, but after transforming into her original form, she immediately gained the upper hand. But at this moment, he suddenly felt a very faint strange breath, which was fleeting. Zilan's eyes moved, and he subconsciously felt that there was something wrong, but the golden dragon kept roaring and attacking, and the battle was fierce, he couldn't separate his mind at all. The next moment, a ray of cold air flowed into Zilan's chest, and he trembled all of a sudden, nearly falling to the ground. The cold is coming. But it's really at this time. However, in an instant, one of the sacred furnaces in one corner went out with a poof, followed by 3 poof, poof and poof, all 3 furnace fires were extinguished, leaving only a wisp of green smoke. Zilan suddenly trembled from the cold. The cold disease in his body is very dangerous. Once it gets sick, it will affect quickly. He was able to support it just now because of the protection of the fire furnace. Now that the fire furnace is extinguished, Zilan immediately found that the whole chess formation was icy cold, like being in an ice cellar. Generally. But how could the furnace be extinguished? In the furnace is the fire of immortal energy, which can go hand in hand to go to calamity. Generally speaking, it should be unabated and inextinguishable. Taking advantage of the moment when he suffered from the outbreak of cold and pain, the golden dragon roared wildly, flew out its sharp claws, and tore fiercely at Zilan's body, tearing off a large piece of flesh and blood immediately. Zilan had no time to think about it, he let out a growl, tried his best to endure the cold and sickness, and bravely rushed towards the golden dragon. He had a cold attack, but the golden dragon was also very weak. Zilan resisted tenaciously, and after many twists and turns, he finally held the golden dragon under his claws again. The golden dragon let out a roar, and finally turned into golden threads and dissipated. Zilan was gasping for breath, his whole body was bitingly cold, and was about to turn into a human body to play chess again, but suddenly felt a huge force appearing from behind, as if pushing him down hard. Zilan's wolf eyes lit up, but before he could react, his gaze was turned upside down, his body fell straight down, and his feet were empty, with nowhere to rely on. Boom! Sydney. Sydney was playing in the forest with the white deer and the rabbits, happily chasing the little rabbit's tail, but at this moment, there was a sudden roar in the depths of the forest, like a loud crash of a heavy object falling to the ground. Startled by the noise, all the animals stopped and raised their ears to look in the direction of the loud noise. I saw a few spirit trees fell down in embarrassment at that place, and some tall ones were broken halfway and half hung on other trees. Bailu said anxiously, I just saw something fall from the sky. Ah! Of course, Shueli also heard the sound, her tail was raised up nervously, but when she saw the nervous white deer and the small animals huddling together in fright, she thought for a while, and then said, You guys first stay here, I'll go and have a look. Sydney has the highest cultivation base among all of them, and holds the key of Wonderland, so she has a strong initiative in Wonderland. The little rabbits said worriedly, You have to be careful. We are waiting for you not far away. Ah! Sydney responded, and then walked into the depths of the woods. She dragged her tail and jumped briskly all the way to the place where the bang was made, familiar with the road. Strange to say, she did feel a new sense of immortality in the fairyland, stronger than everyone else in the fairyland, but she didn't feel scared, on the contrary, she felt more fresh and curious. Soon, she arrived at the place where the loud noise was. As expected, a lot of trees were broken, and the forest was in a mess. She carefully pushed aside the leaves and poked her head out, only to find an animal she had never seen before lying in that part of the forest. He was huge, shaped like a wolf, and covered in snow-colored long fur. Sydney tilted her head, walked lightly, and jumped over with her little paws. Zilan hadn't lost consciousness at this time, he didn't know how long he fell from the 9 heavens and where he landed, he just felt as if he had bumped into many things, coupled with the cold, he was in a very weak state of pain. He barely opened his eyelids to see the situation, and saw a beautiful snow-white little fox with 9 tails coming out of the woods nervously and curiously, walking towards him cautiously. The whole body of the little white fox is pure white and flawless, and its hair is as clear as snow in the first moon, without a trace of variegation. Her steps are light, her figure is nimble, and her black eyes are as clear and bright as night beads, like a pure light jumping out from the bright moon. She is too bright and beautiful. From any aesthetic point of view, she is an overly beautiful creature. It is almost doubtful whether it is illusory. Zilan was stunned for a moment, and her eyes unconsciously moved to the 9 tails behind her. 9 tails? How could she have 9 tails? Isn't the 9-tailed fox extinct in the world thousands of years ago? How can there still be a 9-tailed white fox? In his mind, the dim and blurred picture of the stars and beasts in his Taoist room appeared, and the 9-tailed white fox, a mythical beast that should have been extinct for 1,000 years, lived in front of his eyes. Zilan couldn't help suspecting that he had actually lost his soul in the breaking of the realm, and that's why he saw the legendary 9-tailed fox in the haze. He had just turned 17, and he was still breaking through. If he died so suddenly, how could he be worthy of his parents? Zilan looked at the little 9-tailed fox in front of him in a daze for a while, trying to judge carefully whether she was real, but he was already exhausted and seriously injured. Before he could see clearly, his eyes blurred, and he passed out completely helplessly. Shueli also ran to his side at this time, but still cautiously kept a short and appropriate distance, with her tail taut in a defensive manner, until she saw that the young Master Snow Wolf seemed to have really fainted. Then she walked to him step by step, using her paws he touched him tentatively. Of course Zilan didn't move. Sydney looked at the behemoth in front of him in amazement. She had never seen such a big wolf. If ordinary wolves were placed together with him, it would be like a towering mountain. The hair on his body was a rare ivory-like white. With his eyes closed, he could not see the shape clearly. But it has a slender and fluffy tail, sharp minions, and pointed white ears, which look very soft. Shueli turned her back, raised her tail and put it on the giant wolf for comparison, and found that his white fur seemed to be a little darker than her own. The coat was pure white, but it had a thick double layer and undercoat. There are some greys in it, but it is more natural and elegant. Is this really a wolf? He was badly injured. Sydney walked around him, and soon found that there were quite a lot of fine and dense wounds on his body. The wolf didn't know where it fell from. There were countless scratches all over his body, and many bites and scratches, the most serious of which is the tragic wound on the back. The flesh is turned out, and bloody, there are 3 large cracks scattered and split. The shape looks like the claw marks of some huge animal, but the specifics are Sydney didn't seem to have seen any animals before, so it was hard to tell. She looked at the huge snow wolf for a while, thought for a while, then turned around and ran in the direction she came from. Balu and other small animals were waiting for her not far away, looking this way worriedly, as if they could rush over at any time, but there was no news of Sydney, and they didn't dare to approach it rashly. Seeing Shueli coming back, they rushed up and asked, "Shueli, are you all right? What just fell off?" Sydney said, "I'm fine. The one that fell just now seems to be a big wolf. He's not from Wonderland, and I haven't seen him in the forest before. He's seriously injured and shouldn't be able to move for a while, but he has to heal the wound, or you will die." After hearing this, everyone knew that Shueli should be planning to heal the big wolf. Sydney has often treated the wounds of other animals since she was in Wonderland, and has rescued many animals that were accidentally injured. But the little rabbits were a little worried, looked at each other, and asked, "But it's a big wolf, how big is it? Since he is not a wolf in the fairyland, will he not eat the fruit after his injury is healed?" Shueli knew what the little rabbits were worried about, but she had considered all kinds of possibilities. After thinking for a moment, she said, "No way. In this fairyland, it should be my wolf. Even if there is no change in a short time, I can change it right away, and besides, I feel that he has immortal energy in him, he should be a serious wolf. And step back 10,000 steps, he is so badly injured, even if I help him heal, he will not move for a while. No, we can feed him the fruit first, he can rest assured if he eats it, if he doesn't eat it, we can consider locking him up again. Sydney spoke in an orderly manner, and everyone was relieved after listening to it, and no longer worried about the danger of wolves. Sydney decisively arranged, "Little dear, can you go back to the house and help me get the medicine box? Little rabbits, can you go to the stream and fetch some water for me? I will find some herbs nearby and go there as soon as possible for pre-treatment." The division of labor and cooperation is undoubtedly the fastest, and the animals all nodded in response, and then acted quickly. After Xia Li instructed the others, she immediately searched for herbal medicines. She was familiar with every plant and tree in the forest, and it didn't take long for her to find all the medicines she wanted, and then return to where Snow Wolf was. Snow Wolf was still sleeping with eyes closed, breathing weakly. Xue Li ran behind him, stopped and turned into a human body. She has black hair hanging down her waist, her skin is as white as a cloud, and she is dressed in a plain robe that is elegant and dignified. Xue Li sat down behind him, and checked his injuries again. Seeing the fresh and old blood dripping, she couldn't help lowering her eyes. At this time, Bailo came back with the medicine box in his mouth, and put the medicine box beside Sydney. Xue Li came back to her senses, quickly opened the medicine box and started to move. All kinds of knives are neatly placed in the medicine box, silver needles of different lengths are arranged in 2 rows according to length, countless commonly used herbs are listed at the bottom, and there is also a complete set of medicine pounding utensils. At first glance, it seems to be no different from the murder weapon. Xue Li rolled up her plain sleeves, picked among the knives, and finally chose a small knife that was handy. As soon as she got the doctor's knife, she immediately skillfully removed the useless dead flesh and hair that hindered the dressing of the wolf. Focused eyes, extremely beautiful and neat posture. She obviously looked like a delicate girl, but she didn't show any timidity in the face of such serious injuries. The knife technique in her hand didn't shake at all, and her expression didn't change. With such a terrible injury, unnecessary parts must be removed. This set of medical skills was practiced by Sydney under the strict guidance of Aunt Shayin. At first, Aunt Shayin folded cloth of different colors into a thick piece and used fairy techniques to imitate the touch of the body. She asked her to practice over and over again. No matter which layer of cloth is cut by any knife, there is nothing wrong with it, even if you are blindfolded, you can cut it out. The animals in the fairyland do not jump out of the 5 elements. In the past few years, there were often undeveloped creatures who died of old age and casualties. Later, Aunt Shayin brought their remains back, let Sydney practice, and then prayed for them to save them. Suture thick burial. Since then, many animals have been injured and sick, so Sydney is not without practical experience. In this way, year after year, Sydney's medical knife has become so proficient that she can use it almost without thinking. The little rabbits kept coming and going with the clear water, and the water was transported out pot by pot. The sun unknowingly turned to the west, and beads of sweat appeared on Sydney's forehead. The little animals gathered around Xue Li, anxiously watching her heal her wounds. It took about an hour before Xue Li finally applied medicine and bandaged all the large and small wounds on Xuelang's body. Xue Li just breathed a sigh of relief, but then she suddenly realized that she originally planned to treat the wound both externally and internally. The internal herbal medicine to be given to him after waking up was not found. It would be too troublesome to go back to get it now, so Xue Li decided to find a few trees nearby to make do with it. She asked the animals to stay here to help her look after the big snow wolf for a while, and then turned around and went back to the woods. Zilan's dream was very unstable. He felt pain in his body and a sharp blunt stab, as if he was running away from something, but he couldn't move. He vaguely remembered that he seemed to be breaking through the situation before, but something happened during the process. He thought of the situation where he would die, and thought of his parents. When he failed to break through, he seemed to have fallen from a cloud platform. Now he doesn't know whether he is alive or dead, and he doesn't know where he is. How sad and desperate should his parents be when they find out about the situation? What is the situation in Nine Heavens now? Are Mom and Dad okay? Can he still find a way to go back? A series of difficult questions were circling in her mind, and Zilan was so anxious that she wanted to find a solution immediately, but she couldn't move, as if her whole body hurt even to breathe. But at this moment, he felt something cold on his body. He didn't know what it was, but the pain was relieved immediately. It felt like a person who had been thirsty all the way in the desert suddenly drank like the endless sweet spring. Zilan felt much more comfortable all of a sudden, and more of this kind of cold thing soon covered every sore spot of him. Taking advantage of this rare sense of comfort, Zilan frowned and opened her eyes with difficulty. His cold illness has ended at some point. This disease is always slow. When it is slow, it will last for several days at a stretch, but when it is fast, it comes and goes quickly. Zilan himself does not know what it is this time. Time disappeared. He felt that all the wounds on his body had been carefully bandaged, and the wounds were cleaned very cleanly. There wasn't even a smell of blood. He could only smell the faint herbal scent in the air. Zilan was stunned for a moment, but didn't realize it for a moment. Since his wound can still be bandaged, does that mean he is not dead yet? But who helped him heal? Where is this again? But his daze was only for a short moment. The next moment, he opened his eyes and looked up, and saw the little nine-tailed fox that he vaguely glimpsed when he was unconscious before, with a few spiritual herbs in its mouth, bouncing around. Ran over. Seeing him waking up, she seemed very happy, hurriedly put the herbs on the ground, and shouted to him cheerfully, "Wow!" The little nine-tailed fox was as pure and elegant as he had seen before. Her snow-like hair was shining like snow. A little white fox like this suddenly ran out of the sun and ran in front of him. Zilan he couldn't help but lose his mind for a moment. At this moment, he understood a little bit, the beauty in the legend of the nine-tailed fox that the wolf official said. Xueli was very happy to see Big Snow Wolf woke up, so she ran over to Bounce, and asked him, "Are you awake? How are you? Are you still uncomfortable with the wound?" Seeing the little white fox running up to her, Zilan happily and said politely despite the effort, "I am, the son of the Wolf King and Queen of the Ninth Heavenly Wolf Realm. Named Zilan. May I ask where is this place? Did you help me heal my wounds?" What Sydney saw at this time, Big Snow Wolf, Sydney. A wolf and a fox looked at each other for a while. The surrounding white deer and rabbits watched them nervously. After a while, Xueli turned her head to the others and said, "This wolf doesn't seem to be able to speak. This should not be logically speaking." Just now she felt that the fairy energy in this wolf was very strong, far better than the white deer and little rabbits, and even stronger than her aunt who was a mortal cultivator. The wolf was injured. With such seriousness and such level of cultivation, there is really no reason why you can't speak. But Xueli doesn't know much about the world outside the fairy world, and she's not sure if there are creatures that are full of fairy energy but unable to communicate, just like fairy grass that can't open their consciousness. Thinking about it this way, Xueli is not sure if this huge snow wolf is really intelligent. The little rabbit on the side asked worriedly, "If he can't talk, is it possible that he will eat meat?" Sydney said, "Don't worry, I'll try again." Seeing the little nine-tailed white fox, a white deer, and several rabbits whispering to each other, Zilan frowned slightly. In Zilan's eyes, this kind of scene is completely different. There are many kinds of beasts in charge of the stars of Jokongtian. Besides Jokongtian's own fairyland, each kind of beast also has its own small fairyland in charge of the lower fairyland. Different from the same race in the upper fairyland, the lower fairyland is full of various spirit beasts and small immortals living together, and occasionally even wild beasts from outside will wander in by mistake, and then slowly open their spirits in the fairyland. Many gods and beasts have different origins, the timing of conferring gods and becoming immortals, and the reasons for holding stars. The culture and language are completely different from each other, and it was difficult to get in at the beginning. And the residents in each small fairyland naturally follow the main beast and speak the language of their main fairyland, so it is difficult for fairylands in charge of different Palm Star fairylands to communicate. Zilan had never heard of the language these little animals were speaking in Jukongtian. He has been diligent and hard-working since he was a child, and has outstanding talents. Although he does not speak all the languages in the 9 heavens, he has generally heard them and can speak several of them. It's a bit like an old language from thousands of years ago, with words from ancient languages vaguely mixed in it. The 9-tailed fox disappeared 1,000 years ago, and the language has changed drastically during this period. 500 years ago, the 9-fold genius chose the common language of the 9 heavens. Now not everyone in the lower fairyland can speak it. If the one in front of you is really extinct for 1,000 years, the 9-tailed fox, and what he fell into was really a fairyland controlled by the 9-tailed fox, and it was quite normal for the people inside not to understand the common language. Zilan has not yet recovered from the shock that he saw the 9-tailed fox. In other words, he really didn't know much about the situation he was in. How can the 9-tailed fox still exist in the world? Where is this? How could this little 9-tailed fox be here alone? Is she the only one? Countless questions lingered in his mind, but when he lowered his head and saw the herbs brought to him by the little white fox, he was startled again. Obviously, she found it specially for him. It is indeed the healing fairy grass that Zilan saw in the wolf land. It seems that the little fox dug it from the mountain by himself. This fairyland does not look very prosperous. I don't know how much effort it will take to find such a fairy grass for him. There was a warm current flowing through her chest, and Zilan couldn't help but feel moved. Seeing this fairy grass, it is self-evident who took care of him with so many crisscrossing wounds on his body with a little patience. But the most urgent thing is to find a way to communicate with the little white fox. Zilan thought about it, closed her eyes and looked for something on her body. Faced with the language barrier in the fairyland, Jukongtian is not completely helpless. Immortals, gods, and beasts naturally have their own way of storing things, and Zilan soon found the elixir he wanted from his divine realm. This is the Tongyu pill used for communication in Jukongtian. After taking it, they can understand each other's words even if they don't understand the language. It's just that there are very few people in the 9 heavens who don't know the common language. Zilan is not too far away from the wolf environment, so he doesn't have many opportunities to use it. He only has the ones that were put in a long time ago for emergencies, and there are only 3 left in total. It is obviously the most important thing to figure out the situation between him and Xianjing now. Zilan immediately took out one and let it appear in his mouth. The Tongyu pill melted in the mouth, and Zilan felt a trace of spiritual sweetness flowing through his throat, and then, the voice in his ears changed immediately. The little 9-tailed fox is talking to the white deer. The white deer said, "Shueli, do you really want to keep this wolf here for treatment?" The little white fox said, "Yes. He's injured so badly, you can't leave him alone, or you might die." Zilan was taken aback when he heard that. He didn't expect to hear the little 9-tailed fox talking about him with Bailu after taking the Tongyu pill. He was inevitably a little embarrassed. He grew up so big, because Han Bing couldn't leave home too far, and he hadn't gotten along with girls much, so he was a little reserved for a while. But he still tried to speak again. "Hello, everyone. I am the son of the Wolf King and Queen of the 9th Heavenly Wolf Realm. My name is Zilan. I landed here by accident. May I ask where this is?" Swilly was discussing with Bailu what to do next, but unexpectedly, the big snow wolf was so weak that he managed to open his eyes and look at her, and let out a few from his throat. The sound is very similar to the previous one. Sydney tilted her head in confusion, and blinked at him. Bialu was even more puzzled and asked, "Why is this wolf still barking after being so badly injured? Is it uncomfortable somewhere?" Sydney said, "I don't know, he seemed to be saying the same thing just now, maybe it was uncomfortable." Zilan was slightly surprised when he heard their conversation. He thought he could communicate with the little fox and the others after taking the pill. He could indeed understand the conversation of the little fox and the others, but they still reacted like it's totally incomprehensible. Swali and Balo didn't understand Swalang's reaction and continued talking. The white deer said, "But such a big wolf, we don't know if he has opened his mind. If he is left in the forest like this, will it be bad?" Sydney thought for a moment, and replied, "When he recovers from his injury and can move around, you can put him in my house first." The conversation came to an abrupt end here. Zilan was hearing this. The little nine-tailed fox had just finished half a sentence, and the rest of the sentence became an irregular uhu. Zilan was caught off guard and was cut off from the conversation, which was even more unexpected, and his brows furrowed even deeper. He never expected that the effectiveness of the Tongya pill would be used up in just a few words. Normally, in Zhukongtian, a Tongya pill is effective for at least 1 day, but in this place, it obviously doesn't even last for a sip of tea, only 3 or 4 short sentences. Not only that, but Tongyuan is supposed to be able to realize the dialogue between people on both sides, but now it has become one way, and only his side can understand it. Zilan originally thought that although 3 pills were few, they would definitely be enough to clear up the basic problems, but such a sudden change caught him off guard. Is it because of the special circumstances of the nine-tailed fox wonderland that only those who take the medicine can understand each other? Or, the pill doesn't work for nine-tailed fox? Zilan didn't know the situation clearly, but she didn't dare to use the pills again. He is now in poor physical condition and very weak. He has just arrived in a completely strange place and his mind is not as clear as usual. The remaining 2 Tongya pills suddenly become precious. I used it indiscriminately, so I had to put it away first, and planned to wait until the critical moment to use it. Although I only heard a few words just now, I was able to deduce some information. But it turned out that her name was Sydney. Zilan shook his head slightly. Thinking of the little nine-tailed fox who had just firmly said that he could not be left alone here, and that he would not hesitate to tell his friends that he was willing to let him live in his own home, Zilan couldn't help feeling turbulent, and an indescribable feeling arose in his heart, which was unexpected. I was moved again. At this time, he was at the most helpless and seriously injured time in history. At this time, someone who can selflessly extend a helping hand to him is tantamount to sending charcoal in a timely manner. What's more, the little white fox is so determined, she can't even understand his words, and doesn't know that he is the young master of the 9th heavenly wolf realm, but she is willing to heal his wounds, find herbs for him, and fight for him from friends. He doesn't know girls his age, and no girl has ever done this for him. Zilan was upset and shy. He knew that the other party probably didn't have any special thoughts, but he couldn't help but feel at a loss, so he cast a grateful look at Sydney. Swali didn't notice the sight of Snow Wolf, and she was still explaining to Bela seriously, "If he lives in my house, it will be convenient for treatment, so you don't have to worry too much. If it is confirmed that he is not dangerous, wait for him. Let's let him find a cave or something in the forest and let him live in it, so it won't hinder anything." Hearing what she said, Bela knew that she had an idea in her heart, and she was not afraid of this huge wolf, so although Bela cared about Sydney, he still nodded his head and said, "Well, if there is anything that needs our help, you must say it." "Oh, I know." Sydney shook her tail. As she spoke, Swali remembered that the herbs that should have been fed to Snow Wolf hadn't been eaten yet, so she lowered her head, pushed the herbs to his mouth, and touched him lightly with her little paw. Zilan knew that this herbal medicine was taken, so when she saw it, she opened her mouth and ate it. Swilly thought it would take a lot of effort to make him understand what she meant, and she had already planned to take a bite first to signal, but she didn't expect the wolf to eat it so easily, and was surprised instead. Zilan's injury is not optimistic. Even after bandaging, his persistence in sobriety has reached his limit. After taking the herbal medicine, he felt drowsy, and he closed his eyes again and fell into a deep sleep. After Zilan fell asleep, Sydney still couldn't hold back her interest and circled around him. In fact, not only Sydney, other animals were also shocked when they first saw such a huge foreign object, but fear and vigilance were greater than curiosity, and they hadn't been able to take a good look at it before. The white deer turned its ears in amazement, stunned by the snow wolf's size, and asked in a low voice, "Swilly, what kind of animal do you think this is?" Swilly looked at Zilan's appearance, and said uncertainly, "Should, or be a wolf." The white deer was confused. How can a wolf be so big? Ordinary wolves seem to be no bigger than his tail, and he is still white. Sydney couldn't explain it herself, but besides wolf, she couldn't think of a more suitable word for this species. Swilly simply said, "Let's not worry about this for now, just let him recover from his injuries. Thank you everyone for your help today. Why don't you go back first? I still have some aftermath to deal with, so I'll stay here for a while." Assisting in the treatment is not an easy task. The rabbits delivered water a few times, but they all looked slumped, and the white deer was not as energetic as usual. At this time, the sun was gradually moving towards the west, and the sun was about to set. The animals had been walking in the forest for a day, and it was time to go back to rest. So the little animals did not refuse, bid farewell to Sydney one after another, and went back to their nests. After her friends left, Sydney guarded the giant snow wolf alone. She checked Snow Wolf's physical condition, and saw that it was getting dark, and Swilly was still not at ease thinking about letting such an injured person sleep in the wild. She vaguely remembered that there should be a cave nearby, and it was too difficult to transport a snow wolf that was so big that it couldn't walk by itself. It might not be very comfortable to push it into the cave, but it could at least provide shelter from the wind and rain. The only question is how to get it there? Swilly thought about it. She is the most powerful fairy fox in the whole fairyland anyway, no matter how big this snow wolf is. If it is only a short distance from the cave, maybe she will succeed if she works hard? Swilly's heart was about to move a little bit. She thought so. She put her head on the uninjured side of Swilang's body, avoiding his wound, and began to push forward with all her strength. Swilly pushed with all her strength for a long time, but the snow wolf, which was several times her size, didn't move at all. It didn't seem like a moving thing at all. Swilly was discouraged, and fell to the ground with a helpless ow wow. She glanced at Snow Wolf in disappointment, but things had come to this, and he could only sleep in the wild temporarily before regaining his ability to move. As the night was getting dark, Swilly looked back at Snow Wolf with nostalgia, and went back to the house to find a larger cloth sheet to cover him from the wind, and went back to the house to rest. Zilan fell into a deep sleep, and when he woke up, it was already the middle of the night and dawn was approaching. As soon as he woke up, he found that his body was covered with a cloth sheet. Although it was thin, it was surprisingly large, and even a body like his could be completely wrapped in it. Zilan froze. He had already smelled the smell of the little nine-tailed fox during the day, and there was a similar smell on the cloth sheet at this time, which was obviously left by her, which made Zilan's heart move slightly. He was about to take off the cloth sheet and take a closer look, but he just moved a little, and the heart-piercing pain immediately made him stop, and he clearly realized that he was a serious wounded person, let alone turned into a human body. His body at this moment can't even move slightly. Zilan's mind was a little clearer than in the daytime. He tried to check the surrounding environment with his spiritual sense, and tried to contact his parents in the Jukongtian, but he soon found that it was impossible. His spiritual sense was too weak, and now he could only move a little. A small area, and in this fairyland, even the slightest bit of information from the outside world cannot be felt, as if isolated from the world. Zilan had no choice but to close her eyes first and check the things she was carrying in the divine realm. He originally broke through on the cloud platform, and it was completely accidental that he fell to such a place, so he didn't bring many belongings with him to the fairyland. The double blades he used to break through the realm had already been broken in the middle, but there is still a pair of sabers in the divine realm. This is a gift made for him by the Wolf King and Wolf Queen before he was born. It is a real magic weapon. The body of the sword is ancient black iron scooped up from the Wanhan pond. It is sharpened with the fairy spirit of the Wolf King and Queen and is indestructible. Each of the hilts is embedded with a precious jade that has been passed down from generation to generation in the family. It can be used as a pair of swords according to the owner's will to a certain extent, but they are essentially a pair. Zilan also regards them as the wishes of his parents, and he hardly uses them as weapons on weekdays. In addition, there are only some medicines left on his body just in case, because he can't take things from the divine realm and can't use medicines when he breaks the realm. Zilan looked at these things in silence, thinking about what to do next. His current mobility is still too limited, and the most urgent thing is to heal his injuries. After heals up, he will first understand the general situation of this fairyland, and then try to use writing to communicate with the people here. Before Zilan finished thinking about it, he suddenly heard a faint rustling sound in the forest. He immediately stopped his thoughts, and instinctively looked in that direction vigilantly. However, then, he saw the little nine-tailed fox named Sydney jumping out of the grass with its little paws. Seeing that he was awake, he excitedly called out 2 times and took 3 steps. And made 2 steps to run in his direction. Zilan couldn't help but hesitate. At this time, the sky was not yet bright, and he looked at the sky that was just showing a gleam of light, and fell silent in surprise. In the blink of an eye, the little fox had already run to the front. Sydney woke up early today. She studied medicine from her aunt since she was a child. Before she learned to write, she learned to hold a doctor's knife first, and she has a strong sense of responsibility for patients. This big wolf was seriously injured, sleeping outside, and not sure what species it was. She still couldn't feel relieved after thinking about it, so she simply ran out in the dark to have a look. Of course she was happy to see Snow Wolf waking up, which meant that his spirit was better than before, and having spirit is the first step to recovery. Xueli jumped up to him in one breath, knowing that he might not understand. She still happily jumped up and said, "You woke up. Do you feel better today?" Of course Zilan understood Sydney's intention to come here on purpose. He watched the little fox jump up and down in front of his eyes. Although he couldn't understand her words, he could feel that she was very happy. Zilan is really not good at getting along with girls, let alone the little 9-tailed fox who has been extinct for thousands of years and cannot understand the language. He felt his throat was dry, but he replied speculatively, "I feel much better than yesterday. Thank you for healing me, also, thank you for preparing the quilt for me." Strictly speaking, what Zilan was covered with was not a quilt, but a relatively large sheet. But he has been suffering from cold since he was born, and he is far more afraid of the cold than ordinary people. Although after years of hard training, the cold will not affect him too much when he is not sick, but this piece of cloth has the effect of keeping warm after all. Lan had a very different meaning in his heart. Xueli heard Xuelang also respond with awe and jumped up quickly, answering, "Ah! Zilan, ah ow Sydney, ah! Ah!" The two yelled at each other for a while. No one could understand the other, but it felt like they had chatted, so Xueli jumped over happily, put her little paws on the snow wolf carefully, and shook her head, wagging his tail to examine his wounds. Xueli mainly came to check on the snow wolf's injuries. Xueli had never seen such a serious injury in Wonderland several times, and the snow wolf was an animal that he had never seen before. Time can be good. However, when Xueli sensed the wound on Snow Wolf's body with her immortal energy, she unexpectedly found that the big wolf's wound recovered much faster than she expected. He looked like he was dying when he fell down yesterday, with wounds all over his body, dripping with blood, but after only one night, all the small scratches on his body were healed without even scabs, the wound had stopped bleeding, and there was no more immortal energy flowing from the wound, even the broken bones were already growing and merging, and the speed of repair was astonishing. At this speed, the wolf might be able to move in only half a month. However, he was seriously injured after all, and it would take about 3 or 4 months of training to fully recover to the previous level. Amazing! It was the first time for Sydney to encounter such a situation, and it was surprising but also sincerely amazed. She couldn't help plucking the snow wolf's fur, wanting to climb on top of him and examine his condition more carefully. Zilan could feel the little fox moving around his body, but at this moment, his stomach suddenly let out a long grunt and the sound was very clear in the deserted forest. One fox and one wolf were suddenly quiet. When his stomach growled, Xueli was lying on Snow Wolf's body, so she could hear it clearly. She let out an ah, and turned her head. Zilan's face under the hair squeaked hot. If he was still a human body at this time, his face would have been completely red. Of course, Zilan had never been hungry when he was in the wolf realm, and the feeling he felt now was new to him, but although hunger is natural, it is an embarrassing thing for a girl to hear her stomach growling. Zilan stiffened awkwardly. I don't know if I have been noticed by Sydney. But Xueli's reaction was very normal. She blinked her eyes, and then suddenly realized, are you hungry? Thinking about it carefully, this snow wolf hasn't eaten anything since it fell into the fairyland. He is repairing his body now, and it is time for him to need physical strength. He healed and accidentally forgot about this. She immediately responded, you wait here for a while. I'll find something for you to eat right away. Saying that, Xueli got off Snow Wolf, turned around and ran away dragging her tail. She returned home quickly, found the food at home, dug out a basket and put them in the same way. Before Aunt Cheyenne left the fairyland, she had prepared enough food for the past 6 months. Because she was afraid that she would starve, she even put out a lot more food than normal. At least for a few days, it was enough to feed another wolf. Considering the injury of Big Snow Wolf, Xueli picked out several kinds of food that are good for self-cultivation and put them in the basket. When it was almost finished, Xueli was about to run back with the basket in her mouth, but before she could turn around, the corner of her eye accidentally landed on the wooden box containing radishes in the corner of the room. Xueli's steps with the basket in her mouth stopped before she knew it. This large box of radishes was specially left for her by her aunt before she left to keep her diet balanced, but she hasn't eaten any since her aunt went out. She glanced at her basket, which contained all her usual food, not even a single radish. So Xueli tangled in place for a moment, then the paw turned and ran back to the house. She opened the box with a blank expression, got in, and then took the 2 largest radishes out of the box and put them in the basket. The basket suddenly filled up a lot. It was the first time for Sydney to do this kind of thing. After all, she was a little guilty, her heart was pounding with nervousness. But she immediately comforted herself that radishes are very nutritious, and a balanced diet is also a good thing, and although she doesn't like it very much, maybe that Big Snow Wolf likes it very much? Surely she couldn't be counted as doing something bad. After my aunt comes back, she must check how she is living during this time, and then she will find that she hasn't eaten a single carrot. In this case, when my aunt comes back and asks, she can say that the uneaten radishes are all used to feed the wolves. It was an accident that wolves would fall into fairyland, and my aunt would understand, for good reason. Thinking of this, Xueli immediately and generously added a big carrot to the basket. She looked down at the box under her, only to see that there were still a lot of radishes inside, piled up like a hill. Xueli lowered her ears, couldn't hold back, took 2 more radishes from the inside and put them into the basket, then looked down to see that there were still a lot of radishes in the box. She quietly put 2 more radishes into the basket, but now the basket was full, no more radishes. Can't fit any more. Zilan waited alone on the spot. After his stomach growled, the little 9-tailed fox ran away suddenly. He couldn't understand the other party's language, so he wasn't sure what happened, and the current injury made it difficult to move, so he couldn't catch up. Zilan was lying on the spot anxiously, because she was worried that she might have frightened the little fox, and she was so restless that she couldn't even think about business. The little fox had been running for a long time, but at this moment, Zilan heard the rustling sound of something moving in the grass again. He raised his ears vigilantly, looked in that direction, and then saw something above the grass. A tall and large bamboo basket appeared, and this basket was still moving towards him. The next moment, the shadow of the grass flickered, and I saw the little nine-tailed fox happily dragging the basket out of the grass. The basket looked heavy, and the little nine-tailed fox struggled to drag it to him. Then the basket tilted, lost its balance and fell to the ground, and there was a sound of crash la la, all the contents in it poured on the ground, and it was like a galaxy of stars lying between the two of them, and the ground was piled up in an instant. White and round radishes. These radishes are plump in shape, with green leaves, and even full of aura. At first glance, they are very high-quality radishes that are rarely seen in fairyland. Among the many radishes, there are a few sporadic vegetables and fruits of other varieties. Compared with the number of radishes, the embellishment is pitiful. The little fox was elated when she dragged the basket and ran out, but now she became a little shy. She moved her paw shyly, and said ow to the snow wolf, then carefully got into the basket. He took out a green and tender fruit from the basket, put it on the ground, and reluctantly pushed it in the direction of Snow Wolf with his head. Swilly brought so many radishes to Snowy Wolf in one go, and she felt ashamed after all. In order to express her apology, after much deliberation, she chose some of her favorite foods and put them in, as a silent apology and compensation. Among them, this kind of fruit is her favorite to eat. The quantity is very small, and she is not very willing to eat it, but she still puts one in, but when she really wants to give it to Snow Wolf, she is still a little reluctant. Swilly picked the food around with a guilty conscience, and said, "These are for you to eat, I brought them from home. If you are hungry, why don't you eat and see? If you don't eat raw food, I can help you cook it. Don't be polite, I still have it at home." After finishing speaking, she anxiously looked at the expression of Snow Wolf, but she happened to meet the other's wolf eyes looking at her, and immediately looked away in a little panic. Zilan was surprised to see Swilly bring so many radishes in one go. He felt that he had never seen so many radishes in his life. And after he was hungry, the little fox brought so many things to him, the meaning was self-evident. But this fairyland doesn't look like it has a lot of food, but these radishes are full of aura and carefully selected. The little nine-tailed fox brought him such a big basket so quickly, Zilan she couldn't help suspecting that these radishes were all her daily savings, and that she saved so much on purpose. Maybe it was because she liked eating radishes very much. Zilan looked in the direction of Sydney, and saw that after she pushed all the carrots to him, she lowered her ears slightly, although she tried not to show it, but there was a faint look of disappointment in her expression. Zilan became more and more confident in her judge. Thinking of the happy look of the little fox when he brought the radish to him just now, Zilan's heart softened, with mixed feelings, and he didn't know what it was like. Fortunately, his head was not injured much, and he was still able to move. Zilan then gently pushed the radish back towards Sydney, and said, "After all, it is your favorite food that you have saved so hard. How can I eat it at will? You should eat it by yourself." "It's okay, it's fine if you don't eat, don't worry." However, originally he didn't want to take away people's love, and wanted to return the radish to the little fox, but when the little nine-tailed fox saw him push the radish back to himself, he was so frightened that his hair exploded, and he jumped back a lot. Then he shook his head frantically, shaking his head like a rattle, and even flinched vigilantly, as if he wanted to hide behind a tree. Seeing that the little fox was so determined, Zilan stopped moving. Then, he saw the little fox looking at him with her body tensed. Maybe it was an illusion, but her eyes seemed to be full of hope. Under the earnest gaze of the little fox, Zilan finally tried to lower his head, opened his mouth, took a light bite of the radish that the little fox gave him, and then swallowed it. I saw the little fox's eyes lit up all of a sudden. It was as bright as a sky full of stars. She jumped up excitedly, screamed happily, and jumped around in place. Zilan saw that he just took a bite of radish, and the little nine-tailed fox was so happy that he was slightly moved. After all, he was ashamed to eat all the little fox's food by himself. He noticed that Swilly's eyes were always glancing at a small green fruit in the pile of radishes. After thinking about it, he pushed this small fruit towards Swilly. Went back. Sydney came so early in the morning before dawn, he guessed that she hadn't eaten anything in the morning, so she might be hungry too. Sure enough, when she saw the fruit pushed by Zilan, Swilly no longer resisted as she did when she met the carrot before. The paw was pushed back, and then hugged back into his arms in surprise, hugged the lost and recovered fruit tightly, let out a woo, and rubbed his cheeks. One wolf and one fox had breakfast together. It's just that Zilan frowned slightly while eating. Zilan doesn't dislike radishes. This radish is very good, he thinks it's crunchy and a bit sweet, but he's used to cooked food after all, so eating raw radishes is still a bit strange. Shweli was holding the fruit and chewing on it. She was ashamed of giving the snow wolf all the radishes she didn't like secretly. What's more, Zilan returned the little fruit she couldn't bear to eat. Shweli was very moved and felt feeling guilty. After seeing Zilan's expression, he quickly said, "Because I was afraid that you would starve, so I rushed here as soon as possible. I didn't have time to cook the mature ones this morning, and I ate raw ones myself. I will cook them at noon. I'll give it to you when I'm done." Zilan has been watching the little fox eat. The little nine-tailed fox is covered in white, with white and soft ears. When he eats the fruit, his cheeks move. Woo, even though I couldn't understand what she was saying, I thought it was cute. Zilan said sincerely and gratefully, "Thank you for preparing food for me and helping me heal my wounds. When I recover and find a way to return to Jukongtian, I will definitely repay you." Swilly tilted her head to watch him howl, and when Zilan was about to yell, she thought for a moment, and happily responded, "Away." So when the white deer, the rabbit and the sparrows came to look for Shweli, what they saw was that she and the big snow wolf were eating together and screaming at each other face to face. They came to look for Swilly as usual, because they went to the wooden house and found no one from Swilly, so they went back to the forest to look for them, thinking that she might have come to change the medicine for the snow wolf that fell from the sky, so they come here together, but I didn't expect to see such a scene. Swilly and Snowy Wolf were screaming at each other, although no one could understand what they were saying, but they seemed to get along very well, and several of Swilly's radishes were eaten by Big Snowy Wolf. The white deer ran over in surprise, and said, "Shweli, what are you doing? Isn't this wolf unable to speak?" Swilly had a happy chat with Dagzulang, but she didn't expect someone to come, and she was a little embarrassed when Bela caught her. But Swilly immediately explained seriously, "It's like this. When I heard him speak just now, I felt that we still have certain similarities in shape. I think some of his pronunciations are a little bit similar to our language. So try to talk to him a little more, imitate his name, and see if you can understand it a little bit." Bielu listened to Shweli's explanation, although he didn't understand exactly what happened, but he also felt very powerful, and asked, "Then can you understand what he said now?" Sydney said, "Wait, I'll try again." Saying that, Swilly turned her head and continued to talk to the white wolf. Big Snow Wolf replied, "Ah." Sydney looked back seriously. Belo leaned forward nervously, "Do you understand?" Sydney replied confidently, "No."